Most men think they can instantly tell when something is wrong in a relationship, but the truth is far more uncomfortable. Because when a woman's behavior changes after she has emotionally invested her energy somewhere else, the signs are rarely loud. They are quiet, subtle, psychological, and most men miss them completely. Listen carefully, because this isn't about paranoia or accusations. It's about awareness. Understanding the emotional patterns that reveal when someone's attention is no longer where it once was. The first sign appears long before words are spoken. It's a shift in emotional presence. When a woman is deeply connected to you, her attention feels natural. Conversations flow easily. Her curiosity about your life feels genuine. She asks questions not because she has to, but because she wants to understand you. But when her emotional energy begins drifting elsewhere, something subtle happens. Her focus changes. You may still be sitting across from her, but mentally she feels distant. Her responses become shorter. Her engagement becomes mechanical rather than curious. And it's not always obvious at first. Many men ignore this moment because they assume she's simply tired, busy, or distracted, but emotional distance rarely appears without a reason. When a woman invests emotional or physical intimacy with someone else, her mind often becomes divided. Part of her attention shifts away from the relationship she once prioritized, and this creates the second sign: sudden privacy around simple things, not normal privacy. Everyone deserves personal space, but an unusual sensitivity about small details that were never hidden before. Maybe her phone suddenly becomes something she guards more carefully. Maybe she steps away to respond to messages she once answered openly. Maybe certain topics make her subtly uncomfortable. Again, this doesn't automatically mean betrayal. But human behavior often reveals when someone is protecting information they don't want examined. Psychologically, secrecy creates tension, and tension changes behavior. The third sign is emotional defensiveness, where it never existed before. When someone feels internally conflicted, their mind naturally tries to protect itself from exposure. Simple questions may suddenly trigger irritation. Harmless curiosity may be interpreted as suspicion. You ask something normal, and the reaction feels disproportionate. This happens because guilt and anxiety amplify emotional responses. A person who feels completely transparent rarely reacts defensively to calm questions. But someone protecting a hidden truth often becomes overly sensitive to anything that feels like investigation. And here is something many men overlook. These changes are rarely dramatic in the beginning. They appear slowly: a small shift in tone, a new distance in conversation, a feeling that the connection isn't quite the same as it once was. The problem is that many men dismiss these signals because they don't want to believe something could be wrong. They explain it away. She's just stressed. She's having a bad week. Maybe I'm overthinking. Sometimes those explanations are correct, but emotional intuition exists for a reason. When behavior patterns change without explanation, the mind begins searching for meaning. And that search often leads to the deeper truth most people try to avoid confronting. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of energy in any relationship. When it shifts, behavior shifts with it. The important thing is not to jump to conclusions. The important thing is to observe patterns, because real understanding doesn't come from one moment or one conversation. It comes from consistent behavior over time. And when emotional presence fades, privacy increases, and defensiveness replaces openness, the relationship dynamic has already begun changing. The question many men must eventually ask themselves is not just what she says, but what her behavior quietly reveals when she believes no one is paying attention. There is another shift that often happens when a woman has given her intimacy or emotional attention to someone else, and it's one that many men feel before they fully understand it. Her warmth changes, not necessarily disappearing overnight, but becoming inconsistent in a way that feels confusing. One day she may seem affectionate, relaxed, even playful. The next day, her energy feels distant, distracted, almost guarded. This emotional inconsistency is one of the most psychologically revealing patterns in human behavior. Because when someone is internally conflicted, their mind struggles to maintain the same emotional rhythm they once had. Part of her may still care about you. Part of her may still value the connection you share. But another part of her attention is now invested somewhere else. And that internal division creates emotional turbulence. You might notice that moments that once felt effortless now feel slightly forced. The laughter may still happen, but it doesn't last as long. Conversations might begin normally but lose depth quickly, almost like her mind keeps drifting away. And here's the critical detail most men miss. It's not always what she says. It's how present she feels while saying it. Presence is the invisible signal of emotional investment. When someone is fully engaged, you feel it immediately. Their eye contact, their body language, their natural curiosity all align. But when someone is mentally elsewhere, those signals become fragmented. Her eyes may wander more often. Her responses may arrive a second too late. Her attention may shift quickly to distractions. These small behaviors often appear harmless individually, but together they paint a clear psychological picture. The fifth sign is a sudden shift in routine without clear explanation. Human beings are creatures of habit. Our routines often reflect the priorities in our lives. When someone introduces new patterns into their schedule, new absences, unexplained delays, sudden commitments that never existed before, it doesn't automatically mean something suspicious. But when those changes appear alongside emotional distance, the pattern becomes more meaningful. Because when people invest their time and energy into new relationships or encounters, their daily structure often changes to accommodate it. This is not about controlling someone's schedule. It's about recognizing when the rhythm of the relationship has clearly shifted. The sixth sign appears in how she reacts to affection. When a woman feels emotionally aligned with you, physical closeness usually feels natural. A hug, a touch on the arm, a moment of eye contact. These gestures flow easily. But when emotional attention has moved elsewhere, those same moments can begin to feel slightly uncomfortable for her. Not necessarily rejected outright, but subtly avoided. Maybe she leans away slightly when you get too close. Maybe affectionate gestures feel shorter, quicker, less spontaneous. The warmth that once felt automatic now feels measured. This happens because physical closeness often reflects emotional alignment. When someone's emotional focus changes, their body language often follows before their words ever admit it, and this creates something many men describe as a strange feeling they can't quite explain. A sense that something has changed, even if nothing obvious has been said. The human mind is incredibly skilled at detecting emotional shifts, even when the logical explanation isn't clear yet. You may find yourself replaying conversations in your head, wondering why her tone sounded different, why her attention seemed divided, why certain moments suddenly felt awkward where they once felt natural. And here is the most important thing to understand. None of these signs alone prove anything. Life brings stress, work pressures, personal struggles, emotional ups and downs. But when several of these patterns appear together, emotional distance, secrecy, defensiveness, inconsistency, routine changes, and discomfort with closeness, the dynamic of the relationship has clearly shifted. And recognizing that shift is not about blame, it's about clarity. Because the most painful situations in relationships often happen when someone senses the truth emotionally, but continues ignoring it logically. Awareness is not about suspicion. Awareness is about paying attention to behavior patterns that reveal where someone's true attention now lives. There is another sign that appears when a woman has emotionally or physically connected with someone else, and it's one that many men feel but struggle to explain. Her reactions to you begin to feel strangely indifferent, not hostile, not necessarily cold, just less emotionally invested than before. At the beginning of a relationship, small things matter. Your messages bring excitement. Your presence changes her mood. Even simple conversations can feel meaningful. But when her attention has shifted elsewhere, something subtle changes in the emotional equation. Your presence no longer creates the same emotional response. You may notice that moments which once excited her now feel ordinary. Plans that once felt special suddenly seem less important. Conversations that once lasted hours now fade quickly. This is the seventh sign, reduced emotional response, and it's one of the most revealing indicators of shifting attention. Human emotions follow investment. Where someone invests their emotional energy, excitement tends to follow. Where that energy fades, reactions become quieter, flatter, more neutral. This doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes the change appears gradually, almost invisibly. But over time, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. You might find yourself doing the same things you always did, telling the same jokes, sharing the same stories, offering the same affection. But the reactions are different. Less laughter, less curiosity, less engagement. And this can create a painful kind of confusion. Because many men respond to this moment by trying harder. They increase their effort. They give more attention. They try to recreate the energy that once existed naturally. But here is the uncomfortable truth most people struggle to accept. When emotional investment moves elsewhere, effort alone rarely restores it. Because attraction and emotional focus are not controlled by effort. They are controlled by attention, and when attention shifts, behavior follows. The eighth and final sign is something far quieter, but often the most powerful signal of all. She begins creating emotional distance in subtle ways. Distance doesn't always mean arguments or dramatic changes. Often it appears through small adjustments in how she interacts with you. She may share less about her personal thoughts. She may stop asking deeper questions about your life. Conversations that once explored feelings, goals, and dreams may gradually shift into surface-level topics. Weather, work, daily routines, safe conversations that avoid emotional depth. Why does this happen? Because emotional closeness requires vulnerability, and when someone's emotional energy is invested somewhere else, maintaining that level of vulnerability with another person becomes psychologically uncomfortable. So the mind protects itself by creating distance. Not necessarily out of cruelty, but out of internal conflict. And that distance can feel incredibly confusing for the partner experiencing it. You may still see her, still talk with her, still spend time together. But the emotional intimacy that once defined the relationship begins to fade. The connection feels thinner somehow, like a conversation that lost its depth. And many men describe this moment in the same way. They say it feels like they are standing next to someone who used to feel close, but now feels emotionally far away. This is the moment when awareness becomes important. Not accusation, not anger. Awareness. Because relationships are built on honesty and emotional alignment. When those elements change, pretending nothing is happening only delays the inevitable truth. The goal is not to assume the worst. The goal is to recognize when patterns no longer match the connection you once shared. Because ignoring emotional distance doesn't restore closeness. Understanding it gives you the clarity to decide what comes next, and that clarity is often the first step toward protecting your own emotional well-being. The real question is not simply what she says about the relationship. The real question is whether her actions still reflect the same emotional investment that once made the connection feel alive. There is something difficult many men eventually realize about relationships, and it's a truth people rarely talk about openly. When someone's emotional or physical attention moves elsewhere, the signs rarely begin with dramatic confessions. They begin with quiet disconnection. And by the time most people recognize that disconnection, the emotional shift has already been happening for a while. But here is the deeper truth I want you to understand. The purpose of recognizing these signs is not to become suspicious of every behavior. It is not about turning relationships into investigations. It is about understanding emotional patterns so you can protect your clarity, your dignity, and your self-respect. Because the worst place a man can live emotionally is in confusion. that feeling where something seems wrong, but you keep telling yourself everything is fine. You feel the distance, but you silence your instincts. You notice the change, but you convince yourself you're imagining it, and slowly that confusion erodes your confidence. Healthy relationships are not built on confusion. They are built on transparency, trust, and emotional presence. When a woman is truly invested in you, you feel it without needing to analyze every detail. Her energy, her attention, her curiosity about your life all create a natural sense of connection. You don't feel like you are constantly guessing where you stand, but when that clarity disappears, something important has shifted. And here is where emotional maturity becomes critical. Many men react to this moment with anger, confrontation, or desperation. They demand answers. They try to force honesty through pressure. But pressure rarely creates truth. It often creates more distance. The stronger approach is something very different: calm observation, self-respect, and the willingness to step back and evaluate the relationship honestly. Because a man who values himself does not beg for attention that once came naturally. He does not ignore patterns that clearly show emotional distance. And he does not sacrifice his dignity to keep a connection alive that no longer feels mutual. Instead, he becomes quiet. He pays attention. He watches whether actions align with words. And most importantly, he protects his emotional boundaries. This is something many men learn only through painful experience. They learn that love cannot survive where honesty is absent. They learn that attention cannot be forced where interest has faded. And they learn that their peace of mind is far too valuable to live inside constant doubt. If you ever notice these patterns appearing in your relationship, the most important thing you can do is pause. Not react emotionally. Pause and observe. Look at the full picture of behavior over time. Because one moment means very little. But consistent patterns reveal the truth about where someone's attention and energy truly exist. And if that truth becomes clear, the most powerful decision you can make is not rooted in anger. It's rooted in self-respect. Because a man who values himself understands something that many people forget. The right relationship will never require you to ignore your instincts, question your worth, or compete for basic honesty. Real connection feels different. It feels calm. It feels secure. It feels like two people choosing each other freely, rather than one person constantly chasing clarity. So, let me ask you something honest before this video ends. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt that quiet emotional distance, but ignored the signs because you didn't want to believe something had changed? If you have, write, "I trusted my instincts," or "I ignored the signs" in the comments. Your answer might help someone else realize they're not alone in what they're experiencing. And if this conversation helped you see relationship dynamics with clearer eyes, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who might need to hear this message today. Sometimes the most powerful form of self-respect is simply refusing to ignore the truth your intuition has been whispering all along.